So do recall that yesterday Joe Biden came out and said that he supports a patent waiver for coronavirus vaccines temporarily, that would basically allow other countries to be able to use the formulas of what these companies have come up with for vaccines temporarily. Now, this is something that those pharmaceutical companies do not want because it'll freeze them out of a lot of potential money in the global world. And so they've been fighting it. And so people came out yesterday and were happy, the leftists especially. I even posted a video about Krystal praising Joe Biden for this because I feel like Krystal doesn't do that too often, that is praising Joe Biden. So a lot of people came out and were excited about this. Krystal says that it was a big stand to Big Pharma. And so that was what happened. We do have to be a little bit careful in terms of it could potentially be a little bit premature in that this takes a lot of deliberation within the World Trade Organization. And so we don't really know what the real details of the agreement will be until it's actually finished. So, be a little it may be a little premature, but it's definitely better than nothing and better than another potential outcome. Now, what's really interesting is there's this Tulcel, and this is really interesting because you can really start to establish this sort of train of character that appears to be the case among Tulcels. Tulsi diehards is they're all absolute bonkers lunatics, conspiracy theorists, dumbasses. So you guys all remember Nino House went off the rails. He started doing stuff with I don't know if it was Newsmax or OWN or whatever, and he was saying, Tulsi Gabbard can win all 50 states. There was one singular poll that had Tulsi Gabbard at 9% in Iowa, and after that he said that Tulsi Gabbard was a top tier candidate. So that is, I don't know how a psychologist could see that and not categorize that as delusional. When Tulsi Gabbard was polling at 1, 2, 3%, I don't even know if she made it to 3%, more like 1, 2. Complete insanity. But Nino House went totally off the rails. Now, this is apparently one of his buddies. And so she was responding to the tweets from Krystal, Benjamin Dixon, Mike Figueredo of the Humanist Report, and AOC. And they were all saying, Krystal was happy about it. Ben Dixon says, so maybe we can push Biden left. That's a little bit questionable. AOC says, let's do insulin next. And then Mike had his own tweet responding. And here's what the Tulcel lunatic said. She said, like clockwork, faux left media and DSA squad manufacturers idea Biden's done amazing. Biden didn't move left. Pharma is still in control and getting paid. I don't know where they said that this is not the case. The point is to get data for experimental vaccines. This does not improve the lives of the working class or get us health care. So this doesn't have anything to do with the lives of the U.S. working class or U.S. healthcare. This has to do with stopping a global pandemic. So one thing that lefties care a lot about is lives in other countries, not just the ones in the United States. And so that's what this would do. So when you say get data for experimental vaccines, what vaccines are you talking about? Are you categorizing the current vaccines for coronavirus as quote-unquote experimental vaccines? Are you talking about other potential vaccines, being experimental, that they're gonna... I don't even know what the fuck that means. I have no idea it doesn't make any sense. I mean, if there's a patent waiver for, other countries to do it, what? I don't even understand the connection. It doesn't make sense. It's not like the companies are getting some kind of patent that will allow them to do stuff in other countries. This is a patent that will allow whatever they're doing to be used in other countries, by other people, other companies. So I don't even understand the connection here. But what it appears to be the case is she thinks that the vaccines are like quote-unquote experimental vaccines. So here's another tweet she sent out saying, if you have any sort of platform and push blind trust in Big Pharma, Big Pharma, very interesting, and are demanding mandatory vaccines while calling everyone who simply questions and distrusts an experimental vaccine with many issues an anti-vaxxer, you might as well deep throat that imperial boot, you moronic cuck. So there's a lot of very bizarre terminology here to use. But this is the kind of dumb stuff that'll happen a lot. I was just reading about, and I forgot the dude's name, but he was like this scientist. He was like head scientist in the Soviet Union. Stalin picked him up. I don't think he had any scientific background in academia. He was like he's a peasant or whatever. And so Stalin picked him up, and he totally denied Mendelian genetics. And he had this bullshit theory of like if you plant, plants near each other that they're gonna grow more. And that actually, the stuff that he said and how far back he held them, and the farming practices he taught them, that actually led to the death, like mass famines, like tens of millions, not only in the USSR, but then Mao also picked it up too. But his response to the West basically saying like, dude, the shit you're saying is so wrong. He called them, bourgeois fucking scientists or whatever, and they were just imperial lovers. Like, dude, you can't just put one and two. That's not how this stuff works at all. And so there is no blind trust in Big Pharma. You have to trust that the FDA and their trials and all the other countries that are running their own independent trials are coming to this, conclusion. We know that they went through their trials. The FDA approved it. All the other countries have approved them. But we can see what the effects of the vaccine are. There are no real negative effects unless you have some kind of allergy to something included in the vaccine, under which case you're not supposed to take it. And when you go to get the vaccine, they have you wait for 15 minutes. So in case you have anaphylactic shock, they're going to be there to help you. Okay, so there's no evidence of any sort of, bad things happening with it, none whatsoever. And so, the mandatory vaccine thing is going to be a debatable thing. I think mandatory vaccines for anybody who can actually get it without harming themselves, like having an allergy to it, I think it is legitimate because it's a very spreadable disease. And as you know, if you don't have everybody getting the vaccine, the virus can mutate and break through the vaccines, and you have to make whole new vaccines that would be able to respond to those. You're a public health threat. Your freedom is now imposing itself on mine because your freedom to be an idiot is going to be a public health threat to others. So I think it's totally legitimate for that. But again, this is a full-on anti-vaxxer. So you can see this kind of trend of character amongst these Tulcels where they're completely fucking bonkers. Conspiracy theorists, lunatics. Another one says, thus is the greatest thing when America is trying to privatize experimental vaccines for all. Yeah, I'm sure America's acting on good faith. They totally care about helping other people in other countries. Just ask Latin Americans, Syrians, Libyans, Palestinians, and Yemen. So, honestly, whether or not this is good faith is really irrelevant anyways. Why would the good faith... I don't even think that that's really the reason Biden is doing it. I would think it's more about his legacy and maybe getting favors from other people, the leaders of other nations. But the good faith is pretty much irrelevant if you have the evidence that these vaccines are good. So what you can see here is just pure delusion on the part of Tulcels. These are easily the most, biggest lunatic group I've ever seen. Most insane people. And so Mike Figueredo responded saying, I blocked this MAGA-adjacent conspiracy theorist. That's very accurate, by the way, because apparently she's tweeting about how the Arizona audit that's going on right now is legit. Obviously, Nino House worked with Jack Posobiec or whatever the fuck that guy's name is. He says, but I'm flattered she's still going out of her way to farm outrage from my timeline in incognito mode. So, honestly, this can be a lesson for you as well, because there does seem to be this trend of outright lunacy when it comes to the left, especially these smaller channels or smaller people with these smaller voice, smaller channels. They typically seem to be completely bonkers. You had H.A. Goodman, who was completely insane. Nino House be completely insane. All of these people, sane progressive, apparently went bonkers. There's a lot of fringe crazies on the left, and so I would definitely be careful. You can even look at someone like Kim Iverson, who pulled a full Dave Rubin. So I would say practice skepticism, be careful, And just know that I think that there's a lot of crazy conspiracy theories people out there, especially on the left, because you'll see intersection between like big pharma and coronavirus, and all of a sudden you can't trust the coronavirus vaccine, which has undergone tests literally everywhere around the world, all major nations with all different healthcare systems, blah blah blah. And there's zero evidence of any negative impacts from the vaccine. But you're that crazy of a quote unquote so-called lefty that you're gonna go crazy. So just be careful. Be careful. There's a lot of crazy people on the left, online anyway.